Scripture for this weekend, the 4th of July holiday weekend, is not really very conducive to an Independence Day theme for that. But we could use a little bit of the Romans readings when it talks about having us being set free from sin. But we hear that every Sunday. And if we don't believe it, we don't need to hear it all the time, I wouldn't think. So if we believe it, we know we are no longer captives, but are set free, just as is the case with our nation, the United States of America. So maybe we should look at something different and use something from the gospel, which doesn't have anything to do with independence or even sin. We probably hear enough about sin anyway. We need to know more how we ought to live our lives in this freedom. Just returned from a 3-week vacation. This is the first summer that we've ever spent in Sun City. We've owned a home here for 19 years. And for 6 of those years, we spent the summers in Truckee, and for 12 in Munns Park. So this is a very different summer for us. So we got away for a little while, and when I got back, Tom said he needed to have the information for the gospel and the bulletin ahead of time. So I started my preparation, and it was hot. And when we were in California, we knew it was going to be hot because we looked at the forecast for Phoenix area every day. And we saw that it was going to be between 117 and maybe 120 degrees. So in preparation for returning to Sun City for the summer, we drove through Death Valley. The entire length from top to bottom. And we went to the place that is called Bad Water. And so I looked at the scripture for the weekend, and in the gospel, there it says, a cup of cold water. And I thought that's pretty appropriate for this time of the year. Anybody here not had a cup of cold water in the last week? Every time I went out from the house, my wife said, don't forget to drink cold water. When as pastor of outreach, I make visits on lots of people and probably have been in most of your homes. And oftentimes people say, Pastor, would you like a cup of coffee? No one has said that to me lately. They say, would you like a cup of cold water? And I always take that. Water, so important for life. And how much a cup of cold water is appreciated. In space explorations, when a new planet is discovered, the first thing they try to find out is there water available on that planet. Water. Most of you probably have been aware that there had been a drought in California. Then this year, in the last year, the rains came. And the blessings of the rains coming, in many cases, became a curse. We all, probably the first sign of that was the Oroville Dam situation, with all of that water coming over that. Probably heard that Highway 1, that beautiful coastal highway goes from San Luis Obispo to the Monterey Peninsula, was closed and is closed because of a massive slide caused by too much water in the hills. We drove on our vacation from here to San Diego, and then from San Diego all the way up the coast to Eureka, and then cut across to the Shasta area. We couldn't go Highway 1 from San Luis Obispo on up, so we took Highway 101. When we lived in California, we lived 1 mile away from Highway 101. And all 3 of the congregations I served in California in my 39 years there were on Highway 101. But Highway 1 that went up the coast was just a half a block from our house, and we could see the traffic going by on that. During the course of our trip, At least a dozen times we saw signs, flagmen ahead, 1-lane road, because of all the slides that had come down in California. We stopped at one place. We were fifth in line. And you always wait for the cars to start coming from the other direction, don't you? Because you know that when they're done coming, you can go. No cars came. We sat there and we sat there and we sat there. For they had closed. There was such a huge slide. They closed both directions so that the big equipment could get in there to help reroute the highway. And then finally, when vehicles started coming through, I decided to count them. And I counted 167 vehicles that we sat there and waited for to go by. That's the downside of having water. Visited our son in Santa Rosa, and they have had 59 inches of rain this year. That's 5 feet of rain. He's a general contractor. His main job was along the Russian River. And for 16 days this year, his crew could not get on the job. And he lost thousands of dollars because they continued to pay his crew during that time. Water that can be a blessing and can be a curse. And of course, if you're in California, there's snow on the mountains. Mount Shasta. If you haven't seen Mount Shasta, I hope you see it, because it's a pinnacle. It stands all by itself. And it's all white. It's all white right now. And Shasta Lake is almost totally filled up to the top. If you know California, the highest mountain in the contiguous United States is in California. It's not Mount McKinley, which is in Alaska, but it's Mount Whitney. Mount Whitney. One year before I retired, living in California, when we were driving to Phoenix for a conference, my wife and I had our four-wheel drive. We drove up along the Alabama mountains or hills outside of Lone Pine, and we hiked up onto Mount Whitney. We hiked as far as we could go before the snow covered the trail. And so we hiked back down again. And then we drove to Death Valley, and we hiked again, this time almost 200 feet below sea level. We were 25 years younger at that particular time. But going through California, the many falls, we saw Bernie Falls, the rushing rivers. And I think probably Bob and Linda, you probably were in Yosemite, weren't you? The falls are awesome. And they will continue to be awesome because the road across Tuolumne Meadows is still closed because of snow. And so the snow will continue to melt and the waters will flow. We also had a home in California 12 miles north of Lake Tahoe. And coming home, we drove around Truckee and Lake Tahoe, and it's full and beautiful. And if you know Rainbow Bridge, the dam there, the water is flowing over that into what is now and has been the Truckee River. The water that feeds the farmlands in the area in Nevada east of Reno. Now, I don't want to make this a travelogue, but if you haven't done so, take a trip to California. There's so much that you can see over there. And as we lived there, we learned about what is called water rights. Donner Lake, which is at Truckee, we learned that the top 2 feet of Donner Lake all belong to Nevada. And Truckee cannot touch that water. Los Angeles owns all the water in the Owens Valley, which is a valley just east of the high Sierras along Highway 395. Mammoth Lakes, where they were still skiing when we came by there, cannot even take any water out of the creek that runs right through the center of that town. Water rights are really, in many places, more valuable than the rights for gold. And then we see what people will do for water. My wife showed me an article in a magazine called Population Connection. And the byline before the article in this magazine read like this: Mexico City, parched and sinking, faces a water crisis. And then in the article, a study that was made reads this way: the study predicts 10% of Mexicans aged 15 to 65 could eventually try to migrate north. Perhaps not worrying about an oil pipe, we ought to have a water pipe that goes under the wall. Our immigration crisis could be worse because of our want for a cup of cold water. There are those who are thirsty, those who are needy. Remember the words that Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me, I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. Inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. And then on our short gospel today, these words: whoever welcomes you welcomes me. And then goes on to say, whoever gives a cup of cold water to one of these little ones will never lose their reward. So perhaps we could have titled this sermon, Reward. Reward for doing good. The question is, why do we do good? Do we do good because we get rewards for doing good? I hope not. It's nice to get rewards, but that ought not to be our motivation. Our motivation ought to be that the satisfaction we can get out of doing something for someone else. Cups of cold water. In the last couple of weeks, now that we've been back here, I thought about the heat. I thought about the homeless. And imagine how much a cup of cold water would much more mean to a person here than somebody living in Minneapolis right now. This time of the year, it's more comfortable to be where Pastor Gary is right now, in the land of clear blue waters, the sky blue water. In the wintertime back in Minneapolis, you can keep putting on more covers. In the summertime in Phoenix in the desert, you can only take off so much. It might be almost 10 years ago, maybe more. Our group from ALC was going to a dinner play in the East Valley. It was just after 101 was built. And as we're going down 101, about where the stadium is right now, we hit a flat tire. We didn't have any spare. And we didn't have any tools to fix it. So we had to call to get somebody to come out there to help us to get a tire fixed so we could get to that play. And we all got off the bus. And as we're standing outside that bus, a pickup pulled off 101, drove up beside our bus. A man had driven by us and seen our stalled bus, gone down to the next off-ramp, turned off, came back up north on 101, turned off the next off-ramp, and came back and brought us a case of bottled water. It's good to hear those kind of action. Last Sunday, Marguerite Johnson, who sits way back in the corner there, saw me coming by and greeting people and says, could you get me a cup of water? And we have cups right by our drinking fountain by the restrooms, and I got her a cup of water and brought that to her. And one of the people standing there said, you do a whole lot around here, don't you? It's nice to be able to do that kind of thing, but without expecting a reward. We had a homeless person here yesterday, worship with us. He's been here many times. And I usually don't give any money to people, but yesterday, after preaching this sermon, I decided I better. So I gave him a couple of bills so he can take care of himself right now. A big part of our government in the United States of America has been doing things for nations who can do something for us in return. When you're doing good, you ought not to expect something in return. In California, I was a member of the board of directors of a hospital in San Luis Obispo. And they had auxiliary, as we have volunteers at Boswell and Del Webb and other hospitals. And they were having a banquet, and because I was on the board of directors of the hospital, they asked me to be there to be a speaker for that. And so I said I was glad to do that, and as I addressed them, I said, I'm glad to be part of this good-for-nothing organization. I got their attention. And most of us know good for nothing means kind of worthless. Then I complimented them for being good for nothing, and reminded them that the doctors, nurses, and aides that were doing good for the patients in that hospital were all getting paid for it, but they were being good for nothing. God calls us to be good for nothing followers of what Jesus asks us to do. By just doing that, we have our reward. A blessed Fourth to you all.